Right. So good morning, everyone. It is rather ironic that we are going to talk about technology today, and we had a kind of a breakdown of technology in the morning. This always happens. This is something that is a learning experience for me, and I'm sure it's going to be a learning experience for you because I'm sure most of you use technologies. You are born in technology, etc. Many of you are born in technology. And my experience with technology always has been, whenever I have done this variations of this presentation, there is always a glitch at the beginning. So technology kind of keeps on challenging you that you want to talk about me, but you first need to work me out. So what we're going to do today is something that I ended with yesterday. Okay? And again, it's going to be a discussion class. I want your inputs. I had a very interesting discussion with our Indonesian friend yesterday. So when we think of technology as something that is, we kind of assume that technology is everywhere, which is not true at all. Okay? Because in some classrooms, for example, technology has not reached yet. Students might be using technology. See, using technology outside the classroom and using technology inside the classrooms are two different things. It is something like translanguaging. So if you remember once we talked about translanguaging, so you can use different languages in your social life. That's a different story. But how do you use it in the classroom? Okay? So you might be on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, different kind of social media sites when you are outside the classroom. But is it advisable to bring it into the classroom? And if we bring it, what do we do with it? Because what you do with Facebook outside the classroom is not what we're going to do inside the classroom as such. So these are some questions that we are going to address jointly today, because this seems to be an interesting sub-discipline that has developed in English language education. In fact, no one talks about English language education today without talking about the involvement of some sort of technology or the other. Let me again, as usual, begin with a caveat. Okay? When I am using the word technology today, I am mostly focusing on internet technologies. Okay? So I am not going to really talk about radio or television or recording equipments, etc. What I'm going to talk about is internet technology. So it's mostly post 1990s. That's when the internet becomes extremely popular. And what can internet technologies do for us in learning English? So that's the focus. The second thing, and that's a misconception, that when we talk about technology, it always means a laptop or a computer or whatever. Remember, even the chalk is a technology. Yeah? Primarily because technology is something that aids you in your teaching. So anything that aids you or enhances your teaching or produces a different kind of a teaching tool for you is a technology. So even a piece of chalk, a whiteboard marker are all technologies in their own rights. And therefore it is important to understand that when I use the word technology today, it's not technology in general, but a certain kind of internet technologies that we use in the classroom. Okay? And I'll be more than happy to learn about your own experience. I know that Garima, for example, has a B.Ed, and I think you taught in a school as well somewhere. Anyone who has some teaching experience in the class? People who have actually taught? Oh, quite a few. Okay. You taught in a, where did you teach? In a government college also, tertiary level. Which school? 6 to 8 standard. Okay. English medium school or Hindi medium school? I'm sorry, I think we are meeting for the I think we are meeting for the first time. So what's your name? Ansh. So yes, second semester, right. So you got bachelor's. So this was a government English medium school or Hindi medium school? Okay. So you used to teach English over there. Okay. All right. And you used to teach English and social sciences. That's very interesting in India because you don't have a specific English teacher, especially for lower classes. Teachers are supposed to teach everything. Okay. This was where was this? Agartala. Okay, okay. And this was a government school where you went for practice teaching and you taught English over there. Also sciences. Okay. How long did you teach over there? 3 months.
Sir, I taught him NGO for 3 months.
Oh, that's interesting.
I taught my brother younger.
Of course, yeah. I mean, we can take informal teaching as well. So informal teaching, of course, helps you to become a formal teacher in a certain sense. So, what did you teach in the NGO? It'll be interesting to.
Sir, even though they were like 10-year old, 11-year old, I had to start from ABC because they didn't have
All right.
alphabets.
Okay.
Start
Okay.
with the alphabets, then whatever they see in their house, I tried translating it in English.
Okay. Okay. So these were mostly children from the disadvantaged sections of the society. Okay. All right. We'll come to a story later. Oh, sorry, I missed out.
Where did you teach in Indonesia? Where do you teach and what do you teach?
Subject.
Yes.
What subject, which classes?
In university, so again tertiary level. So we have a good mix over here. Garima, you had some experience in teaching, and I'll come to you. You taught in schools, right?
I was teaching in school, in government school, and I also taught in NGO.
Okay, all right. So again, lower classes, middle class, middle school. Okay.
Yes, sir. I taught in the class at primary level,
Okay.
and I also taught in the university level too.
Okay. Okay. So you have experience both at primary and the university level. So that's an interesting experience. I'll be very much willing to learn from all of you about your own teaching experiences when we come to technology and use of technology, etc. So what we're going to do today is we're going. I don't know how long this class is going to be, depending on the discussions that we generate. I do have a large number of slides, but let's see how much we can do. This is just a kind of a background to what I'm going to do today. If anyone can identify this picture, or at least identify the man who is there in the picture. He is? No. Sorry, I don't know. I might be able to. So they are playing chess. I guess that you're going to make it out. This man is a very famous chess player. Used to be. He's retired now. Any idea who this man is? Not visible at all? Yeah, the picture is a. Okay, Garry Kasparov. Yeah, the world champion. So this is a game in 1997 that Kasparov played with a computer called Deep Blue. Okay, this was a special computer that was developed to play against a human. Okay, because there was a raging debate at that point of time whether computers are going to replace humans, humans are better than computers, and the logic that was given is, since humans are much more creative and computers only have ability to replicate, they can simply repeat things or commands that you give them, humans are obviously much better than computers. And remember, this is a very long debate in the history of mankind. Yeah? So what is better, the man or the machine, the humans or the machine, etc. Yeah? The game went on, there was I think 6 games that were played in 1997. In the first round, Kasparov won, and people really cheered, saying that, see, we always told you humans are better than computers. Okay? In 1997, IBM kind of upgraded the computer and challenged Kasparov again. Okay? So this computer called Deep Blue was developed by IBM, and they challenged Kasparov again, and Kasparov was defeated. He lost. Okay? Which was thought of as unthinkable, that a machine can defeat a human being in an extremely creative game. And the chess is extremely creative. Yeah. Let me just tell you as a kind of an aside that Deep Blue, and this is a computer that you see, if you can make out that there is a screen over here, that's the computer Deep Blue. Deep Blue could perform about 8,000 operations per second at that point of time. Okay. That debate, of course, is dead now. Are machines better than human? Well, it kind of persists in some discourses, because nowadays you don't play against computers anymore. Computers play against each other. So the second image that you see was actually a game that was played in 2018, and here the game, a chess game, and here the game was not between two humans or a human and a computer, but between two computer programs. Okay. Alpha Zero was a computer program that was developed by DeepMind. Stockfish was a computer program that was developed by what is now called Amazon Technologies, and they played against each other, and their speed of computation in 2018 was 80,000 operations per second. Okay. Remember, this was 6,000 in 97. Within a span of 21 years, the computers could perform 1,000 times more than what they could do in 1997. Now, why am I telling you this? Primarily because during that period, and this is the period when you have technology coming into our lives. Okay? Sushant sir and me come from a transitional generation. Okay? And we can tell you very, very interesting stories of life without mobile phones, okay? Of standing in queues to make a phone call, taking a token so that you could call back home only after a certain point of time. Okay? So if you made a call after 9 o'clock, the rates would be halved. If you made a call after 11 in the night, then rates would be 1/4, etc. Okay? So we came from that generation, then transitioned to the technology generation. But the period that I am talking about between 97 and 2018 is the period when there is this technology boom. Okay? And it kind of spreads right across different fields of society. Just to give you an idea of how this boom happens, and this is again old data, this must have changed by now. So in December 1997, the people who used the internet was around 70 millions. Okay? This is 97. This is 1.7% of the total world population at that point of time. Okay? So this is called net density. So what is the density of users in a population? And this is the data from June 2018. As you can see, it has jumped 50 times, more than that, 55 times. Okay? So you have this sudden spread of technology from within a span of 20 years. This has, remember, never ever happened in human civilization. This rapid, almost quantum leap of very little amount of technology to massive amounts of technology. Because technological leaps, if you look at human civilizations, took long times. It's not that it suddenly happened one day. Okay? And this is the shortest period of time where a technological leap has happened. Okay? And therefore, as teachers in the classroom, we'll need to think about what do we do with this leap. Okay? So this session is more going to be about questions rather than answers, because remember, we are just too close to the phenomenon. And if you are too close to the event that has happened only in recent times, you don't really know how to deal with it. If you have a history of it, a long history of it, you can learn from it. But this is very, very recent. Okay? Though Generation Z, people born after 2000, might not even think about that as something, because you can't think of your lives without any form of technology at all. Okay? So what are the things that we need to keep in mind? The first thing, of course, when technology first started coming in 1996, there is this thinker called Manuel Castells. Manuel Castells had this famous book called The Information Society, yeah, the Information Network. And Castells was already predicting what's going to happen. So he said with the spread of global technologies, what is going to happen is they are globally distributed, but I'm sorry, they're globally produced, but locally distributed. Okay, so and that is what is happening right now. So you have global production of technology, and then they are distributed in local places. By 2000, you can already see that people have started thinking in terms of how this technology can be used for language education. Okay? So people like Charles Correa are already claiming that computer technology are expressive tools for human nature. Okay? And therefore, they can be used expressively for language or for any kind of a creative endeavor within the classroom. Okay? So that's just in 3 years, in 4 years, we have suddenly realized that technology can play an important part in our classrooms. If that is so, what happened? Now remember, I'm going to give you a more global view, because by the time internet technologies were really used in South Asian classrooms or Asian classrooms or classrooms along the global south, there was at least a 10-year gap, because people started using the internet by late 90s, early 2000, but there were only a select few. There were a huge amount of hardware issues, software issues, etc. It was only after 2010 or so, by that time, remember, internet technologies had spread quite rapidly across the global north. Yeah? So I'm sure that you know about this distinction between the global north and the global south. Yeah? So the global north kind of produced technology, as Castell said, and it was distributed in the global south in different ways. Okay? And that's why you still use things like whatever, Instagram or LinkedIn or etc. These are all produced in the global north and then distributed in the global south. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a brief history. I am very interested in history of things, as you must have noticed by now. This is the third class. So I'll give you a brief history of how technology started entering the classroom. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is, can we use them for our own purposes, and that is where your own context become important. Okay? So depending on where you are, and that's why I mentioned that very interesting conversation that I had with her. So what happens, for example, when you do not have access to technology, or you have access to very minimal technologies? And we'll think of ideas like digital divides. So there are these new phrases called digital divide. Okay? Just like you have social divisions, you also can have digital divisions. So people who have access to technology and people who do not have access to technology. I'll also very briefly tell you what are the different traditions of research that has happened in technologies, and hopefully, as Sir was pointing out, if the first year students take up some of these ideas for their MA dissertation in the 3rd or the 4th semester, would be fantastic. And then of course, we'll have a discussion. I'll just post some questions, you can post some questions, and we'll end there. So very quickly through the history part of it, and I'm talking about, this is around the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s, and I'm mostly going to talk about the global south, because global north started a bit early. So in the global south, around the 2000s, and I'm sure that people, how many of you were born in 2000s? I'm sorry to ask your age, but yeah. So we do have quite a few Gen Zs. Okay. So you must have, when you were growing up, I'm sure that you already had access to some form of technology. Your parents were already using probably what was then known as a modem-based technology. So they would have a modem which would be connected to a phone line, and that would get you the internet onto the computer. Yeah? And if the phone line was dead, you couldn't get any internet connection at all. Okay? So people who were born during that generation, or people who were transitioning into that generation, were already experimenting with whether this technology can be used for teaching English in the classroom. My focus is going to be English, but we can think of other languages as well. A lot of experiments happened, for example, in teaching of sciences. So how can we use technology for teaching of sciences, etc. So I'll just give you some examples of this, and this is the early internet and what we call World Wide Web, the WWW. And if you are interested in the history of the internet, there is a lovely YouTube channel called History of the Internet, and you can simply find out what that history is. Yeah? So some of the things that came up initially were things that I'm sure many of you have not even heard of. So Microsoft was launched at that point of time, okay? And Microsoft came up with this feature called Microsoft Comic Chat, okay, where you could pick up a picture for yourself and then chat with a large group or community of people who were using the language using I don't know whether you are aware of this feature in Google. It used to be there, now it has disappeared. It used to be called the Google Chat. Anyone? So now it has become Gtalk, of course. Initially it used to be called the Google Chat. Okay? So basically where a group of people can get together and chat with each other. Okay? And this is what Microsoft launched for language learning. So what they would do is they would install this software in the computer and then ask a group of learners, probably from the same country or from different countries, to get together and then chat on a topic using English. And the belief was that through the use of this technology, you could learn language through practice, through interaction, etc. The second one, anyone? E-twining it was called. This is for the older generation. You remember pen pal? What was pen paling? What was the pen pal? Exactly. So you have a pen pal, you write letters to a friend whom you don't know. Okay? And many of the magazines in those times, in India for example, there were these very popular magazines called Tinkle, etc. I'm sure that many of you, again generation Z, probably would not have encountered them. So in Tinkle, at the end of Tinkle, there would be these addresses given of people. Okay? You could choose one of those addresses and then write a letter and make friends with that person. So that was called pen paling. Okay? This is the electronic version of pen paling. Okay? So what happened was, this was used in very innovative ways sometimes in the classrooms. For example, I want my students to interact with students in Indonesia. My institution does not have any money, obviously, to take all my students from India to Indonesia. So what I do is, I put them across as pen pals. And I give them a topic. It is a structured thing that you do. So what I do is I give them a topic on which they are going to discuss, write to each other. For example, festivals in India and festivals in Indonesia. Okay? And they keep on writing to each other, and through that writing, and teachers in Indonesia and teachers in India will keep on commenting, improving upon their writing, etc. And that helps them to write across cultures. Okay? So this is what e-twining did. The third thing, anyone who is aware of this internet relay chat, I'm not talking about the older generation, they would know this. All of you know Yahoo, right? All of you know Yahoo chat? So Yahoo chat started what is known as the internet relay chat. it was very strange when it first started. So you would have these chat rooms in which you can enter, okay, depending on what your interests are. For example, if you are interested in learning about science, so there would be chat rooms dedicated to science, okay. So yeah, it's like a Discord. So you enter that chat room and register yourself in that chat room, and you have two windows, two split windows in that chat room, okay. So the first window is basically all the chats that are happening in that room. It keeps on scrolling again and again and again. The second window, the split window, is the window where you can type what you want to do, etc. It was very disorienting at times because the people on the first window were not aware of what you are typing. So they would keep on having a conversation, and if you are a bad typist, if you didn't have the speed to type, then by the time you respond to someone's query, it's already gone, okay. But again, a method of teaching English, and a large number of classrooms started encouraging students, classrooms that had resources for having all this, started asking students to go to these chat rooms, join chat rooms, etc. Remember, at that point of time, privacy and security were still not thought of in the way that we are thinking about now. Yeah? I think there is one more example, and then we can move on. There were also these dedicated websites that were created. This still exists, Dave's ESL Cafe. And what these websites did was, they used to have these lesson plans. People who have done B.Ed would know what a lesson plan is. So they would have these structured lessons which would include technology within it, okay. And so you will have ready-made lesson plans that can be taken and used in the classroom. They also had what were known as query rooms. So you can put in a question, if you are a teacher, for example, you can put in a question in that forum, and if some other teacher has a solution to that, he will get a solution to that problem that you are facing, okay. So that's why it's called a cafe. So you had this Dave's ESL Cafe, which was very popular, very used by almost every teacher at that point of time. So it produced this community of teachers in a sense, okay. And this was an early recognition that technology can form communities, okay, and much larger communities than social communities that we understand in that sense. One of the reasons that Facebook is launched at that point of time, so you can form a community. Okay? Let me see if there is something else. Sorry. Anyone who has played this, the Web Quest? Well, it's like a game. Okay? And people who are interested in gaming, how many of you are interested in gaming? Internet gaming? No? No one has played Pokemon? Oh, okay. I mean, it became a craze, right? So it's a game, but the game can be set up for learning as well. Okay. Many of the web quests were designed by teachers. So a web quest is basically the students will have to follow the clues and get to the final solution. Okay. It's a quest. So for example, you enter a castle and then you have to solve certain vocabulary riddles. Once you solve it, you move on to the next stage. In that stage, you will be given some grammar puzzles to solve. Once you solve that, you move on to the next stage. So that's the quest, okay, till you reach the final stage and complete the quest. And these kind of games started getting into teaching of English during this period, okay. Very early forms of games, not the sophisticated ones that you see today. Yeah. Sorry, you had a question. So this is the first phase. In terms of understanding, the last one, of course, I'm sorry, I don't remember how many are there. This was the first teachers community that was formed. It was called NetTeachL. Okay, it was a huge community with more than 1 million members at that point of time. Okay, which had forums where teachers could discuss their problems, where teachers could post their things, where teachers could understand other methods that were getting used in other countries, etc. So this was a massive teaching community that was formed at that point of time. So this version of the web is called Web 1.0, okay? The first version of the web, the first version of internet. And in terms of learning or teaching, you must remember that these were mostly text based, because the technology was still not there which could carry images or audio or video files. You could not transfer image, audio or video files at this stage of technology. Okay? This was mostly writing, as you can see from different examples that I gave. You had to write, it was mostly text based. The second thing is, it was mostly also information based. So you could ask for information, you could get information, the students would learn about certain things through interactions, etc. So it was based on the delivery of information. Okay? The third thing was that you had what was known as the individual user domain. It was very difficult to be in a group. You had to interact with the group only as an individual. There is no other way that you could have interacted. Okay? So it's not like a WhatsApp community where anyone can post anything at a point of time. So you could join it, only after you join it, you could act as an individual at that point of time. And many of these early software that were developed for language teaching were based on the behavioral theory of education. So I discussed it briefly, if you remember Skinner, in the audiolingual method. The belief was that you move from one stage of learning to the second stage of learning to the third. So you move from simple learning to more complex forms of learning. And until and unless you master the simple forms of learning, you cannot move on to the complex forms of learning. Okay? So it was based on this mastery principle. You master level 1, then you move on to level 2, you master level 2, then you move on to level 3, etc., etc. Okay? And as I said, it is a one-to-many communication. So you could, as an individual, communicate with many, but when that many responds, you don't get the many responses, you will only get an individual response. Okay? So this was the larger learning model of English. So what happens after this? And this is the second shift, or what we call Web 2.0, which is kind of continuing. Some people say that it is now Web 3.0, because now we have something called the semantic web, which is, we'll talk about that a bit later. So what the semantic web is, I'm sure that you must have noticed that it's sometimes very eerie and sometimes extremely disturbing. You must have noticed that if you search for something on Google, and if you go to Facebook or if you go to Insta, similar kind of things start appearing. Okay? So the semantic web is the next version which predicts, so it's a predictive web. Okay? So it predicts your likes, your dislikes, and gives you suggestions about your likes and dislikes, etc. Okay? This was not possible in Web 2.0. And of course now we have the integration of AI, which we'll talk about again a bit later. So what happened in the second shift? All of you know this, right? Blog. Now the blog was something that could, that opened up the spaces. Now you can have a private diary on the internet where you could talk about your own experiences, and you can open it up for a public space where a large number of people could comment, give you suggestions, and then you can use the blog for large amount of communicative purposes. I'll show you how to use a blog, for example, if you're interested, for language learning as an example later. The second things, I'm sure that you know many of these, so I'm just going to show them to you. Is there any other? No. Okay. So many of these new things started appearing. I'm sure that you know this one, Wikipedia is only one version of the wiki. You can have different kinds of wikis. For example, you can have Wikimedia, you can have wiki travel, etc., etc. So wiki is basically a space, an interactive space, where different kinds of things, we can even have wiki meets. So you can plan an entire journey together. Imagine that 6 of you, and somebody was telling me that you went to Shantiniketan. So you could plan that entire journey on a wiki, okay? Where to go first, how to go next, and people keep on adding to it, etc. So you can have an entire map of the journey on a wiki. So wiki started coming up. Glockster was this video app that was used for language teaching. These are very small. Vocaru was a podcast app. So you could record your stuff and put it up on the internet, and people could comment on that, whatever you said. For example, this recording could go up on Vocaru, and then I can open it up for public comments, and then people would say, well, my experience is this, my experience is that, etc. And many other things like this. What was different in Web 2.0? This is the thing that was, so what Web 2.0 could now do is they could integrate all sorts of things together. Okay? So for example, it often used to be called the virtual learning environment. Sometimes it was called the personal learning environment. Okay? So you create a virtual learning environment which can integrate all sorts of technologies together. For example, you can begin with things like emails. Emails can be integrated with social bookmarking. You know what social bookmarking? I'm sure many of you would be aware of this. Or if you know how to bookmark a thing, right? So on Twitter or whatever. But there is also something called social bookmarking. Social bookmarking is used for, it is still there. Yahoo, for example, still offers it. You can bookmark entire sites which contain information, okay, which can be later used and then share that site. So there was one bookmarking, so there are specific sites of social bookmarking. There was one, there is still one called Delicious. Okay. So you can use Delicious, and I'm sure that you have, some of you have used Delicious. Delicious is kind of a virtual library that you can create for yourself and then share that library. I'll write it down for you. And this worked wonders actually. Imagine that I belong, so our Indonesian friend over here belongs to Jakarta, okay? Our Indonesian friend over there belongs to a much more remoter region. So what she can do is she can create a virtual library on Delicious, bookmark all the sites which has all the material, and simply share that link with her, and she doesn't have to spend too much of internet time trying to look for things. Okay, so this is what social bookmarking did. Of course, you had web publishing. This is the time when YouTube came in, so you could publish your lectures, your everything on. Remember, earlier YouTube did not allow, I think, more than 8 minutes of your recording. Now, of course, it's unlimited if you have a channel. You had blogs, so you could publish whatever you're writing. You could integrate it with wikis, sometimes called wiki spaces, and blogs, and then of course you could set up web conferencing and all that. Yeah. So all these could be integrated as a virtual learning environment, okay, which could be complementary or supplementary to what was actually happening in the classroom. Sometimes, and there is a mode of learning that has become very popular nowadays, it is called blended learning. Okay. So in blended learning, what happens is what happens in the classroom. For example, I'm getting recorded, and once this recording goes online, okay, if it goes online, then you can still carry on the conversations outside the classroom. So for example, you can post a question on a forum saying that you said this in the class, but these are my reservations about it, and then we can carry on a conversation over there. So you are blending actual face-to-face teaching with something that is happening virtually, etc. Yeah? And this was made possible by Web 2.0. Theoretically speaking, what Web 2.0 also did was it could combine now. Remember, Web 1.0 is text. Now, what Web 2.0 can now combine text with multimedia forms like video, audio, images, pictures, etc. So everything can be combined. That is why YouTube comes up now. You couldn't have YouTube in Web 1.0. You couldn't combine videos, for example. It is much more synchronous than Web 1.0. Now, there is a terminology used in technologies. So you have synchronous technologies and asynchronous technologies. Okay, so synchronous technology is something that happens at the same time. Okay? For example, in Web 1.0, once you write an email, you have to wait, right, for the response, at least for some time. That is called an asynchronous technology. So it's not in the same time. A synchronous technology is something that can happen at the same time, where everyone can participate at the same time. Okay? And this is what started happening with Web 2.0. Remember, the communication is now many to many. It's not simply one to many. So many people can participate at the same time. It was much more collaborative because if you know how Wikipedia pages work, you can go and edit a Wikipedia page. It doesn't mean that your editing is going to come, because they have a moderating system, but anyone can contribute to a Wikipedia page, anyone. And if it is seen as a valid form of intervention, they will actually change it. In fact, Wikipedia constantly tells you, if you go to Wikipedia pages, it constantly says that this article seems to lack references, or this seems to lack enough information about this event. So if you know something, please add. Okay? So it was much more collaborative and interactive. And therefore, they had learning possibilities like virtual learning environments, VLEs, and personal learning environments, where you can create your own personal learning environment without depending too much on what is happening in the classroom. Okay? So you could create your own learning environment and learn on your own. Okay? Let's come to the third shift, and that's where we are now, okay? All of us. And this is the only thing that happens in the third shift. So what happens now is, remember, you probably needed, even in Web 2.0, different sorts of devices. Okay? So you might need a desktop or a laptop. Laptops were very expensive at that point of time, but you probably would need a desktop. Mobile phones still did not have that much of existence. Remember, they were, if your parents had a mobile phone, you could ask them, they were like bricks, this big, huge, heavy. You needed actually a different back to carry them, and worked on a technology called CDMA, which was basically the range of the network was 5 to 10 kilometers. Okay? So you had to be within that range to be able to be contacted. In the third shift, of course, what happens is now you have all technologies that can be integrated within a small device, which is the mobile phone. And this starts happening somewhere around the 2008, 9, 10, and that is where learning changes completely. Because I'm sure that if I ask you to search for something now, many of you do have laptops, but the most common thing that you do would be whip out your phone and search on it. Yeah? So everything is integrated within the third shift mobile devices. In that case, and remember, the second thing is that, of course, there is a huge amount of exponential increase in the number of websites, number of social media sites, etc., etc. In India, I don't know whether anyone would know this, one of the most popular sites, even before Facebook made a big impact on India, was a site called Orkut. Anyone knows Orkut? Yes. Oh, okay. Were you on? I'm sure that you were not on Orkut, because Orkut disappeared. Yeah. And Orkut was very quickly replaced by Facebook. So what was happening is that the rapid change in technology, and because all technologies could be integrated in a small device now, there were also huge amounts of erasures. Let me share a personal anecdote. My first email was in 1998, okay, where I created my first email. My email was my name @angelfire.com. Anyone heard of that site? It was called angelfire.com. You won't even find it because the company has disappeared and there are no domain names of Angelfire anymore. Okay. Of course, later I moved on much later to Gmail when it was launched, and then before that, of course, in India something called a Rediff Mail was launched, and Rediff Mail became a very popular site where people started opening their accounts. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is with this third shift, the rapid pace of technology also meant rapid erasure of many things that were there in technological side. So things will appear, they will disappear very quickly. Okay? So survival becomes an important part. So sometimes it became very difficult for teachers. For example, they were using one kind of software to teach students in the classroom. Maybe 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, that software becomes obsolete. So you need to buy a new one. Okay? So all these challenges started coming up, and they are still there. So let's look at what really starts happening with the third shift. So before we come to the next point, once we realize that, and I think that's something that all of us need to keep in mind, that like many other things, and as I said earlier, technology takes a quantum leap. Okay? So the change in technology is much faster than what actually happens in the classroom, okay, in a face-to-face situation. So things keep on getting upgraded automatically. That is not what happens with teachers and students. You are not hardwired for automatic upgradation. You have to upgrade yourself, right? Technology does it on its own. So you are sleeping in the night, your mobile might have upgraded itself. Okay? It does it on its own. And this is something that we need to keep in mind, that when we think of technology and use of technology in the classroom, then we also need to think of what are the key elements that we bring to the classroom as teachers, as students, and what of those elements are we going to use and take help from in terms of technology. So I think that is very important for us to retain, that there are certain key principles that need to be adhered to when we are dealing with a classroom, and then look for technology rather than jump onto the bandwagon of technology and say, let's bring this newest technology into the classroom because it works wonders. Okay? And these are questions that we'll have to keep in mind, questions that I'm going to ask you later. So what are the key elements of learning a language or teaching a language? These are 4, and you can keep on adding to this list. One of the key elements, of course, is feedback. Okay? You cannot learn a language until unless you receive a certain amount of feedback in that language. That's an essential part of learning a language. Be it spoken language or written language, be it formal feedback or informal feedback, but you need feedback. Okay? That is a key element of any language learning. And if you think of your own experiences of learning a language, it was based on feedback. You got feedback from your family, you got feedback from your friends, you got feedback from your peers, and that is how you learned a language. Yeah? The second, of course, key of any language learning, and this is something that, for example, when we are discussing communicative language teaching, we discussed, was this struggle with language. So you need to solve a problem in order to learn a language. The third thing is you need support, and that is, so it's called scaffolding. So you need some sort of a support. Okay? So you cannot learn language on your own. As I said, I mentioned Vygotsky, uh, no child can learn a language sitting inside a room. You need social interaction, you need some sort of a support in learning a language. Okay? And most important, I think Shanji mentioned it yesterday, and we'll talk about it, I'll tell you a story, is what is known as affective support. Okay? If you have emotional anxiety, it has been proven in time and time again through different sorts of research, including psychological and clinical psychological research, that if you are anxious or emotionally anxious, then language learning reduces drastically. Or any kind of a learning, not even language learning, any kind of a learning reduces. Okay? So one of the important aspects, of course, is also affect. So the affective support plays an important role. If you have affective emotional support, then you tend to learn language quickly. Okay? And I'm sure, let me ask you this question which might look a bit out of the way, randomly, okay? Who was your favorite teacher in school? Welcome to.
My favorite teacher is in my middle school, school years. I have one of my favorite. She is a female teacher.
Okay, okay, okay.
I don't know her name exactly, but it's very well known.
Who is your favorite teacher? If you remember one.
I think my favorite teacher was in the third year of primary school. Her name was Beatriz. She was very effective, and also, then I go to fourth grade, and the teacher was totally the opposite. So it was
Okay.
very
Comparative.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite teacher?
In school life, I didn't have any favorite.
You didn't like any teachers at all. You had a very tough emotional experience of going through school.
But in colleges, I had.
In colleges you had. I'm sure that everyone has a favorite teacher. Your favorite teacher
It's good.
in school, okay?
It was my English teacher. Her name was Nalanda.
All right. Your favorite teacher? Anyone who wants to volunteer?
My favorite teacher was my mathematics teacher,
Which is very rare actually. So good, yeah. We were all scared of our maths
He
teachers.
was a part-time actor.
Ah, okay.
So he used to act like a South Indian actor, hero. So it made mathematics very interesting.
Oh, that's very, very
It's
interesting.
like Rajnikant plus mathematics.
It's interesting when we were talking about your teachers, none of you talked about what you learned from them. It was mostly the emotional, the affective, and how nice they were, how good they were a good actor or whatever, So you remember your teachers for their affects most of the time, okay? And therefore affective support is a very important support for learning. Now the question is, does technology address any of them? And you can keep on adding to this list. This is not an exhaustive list. You can keep on adding things to this list. So we'll look at only these 4, and then you can suggest other things that are important. So what we're going to do is, we're going to see whether technology can help us in these. Okay? Does it help us or does it not help us? Yeah? So let's take feedback first. And when I say feedback, I'm basically looking at linguistic feedback, but it could be other kinds of feedback as well. Yeah? This is the latest one, so I'm sure that many of you, and I think Nalanda has Grammarly, so most of you would know that Grammarly gives you feedback on your writing. Sometimes be a bit careful with Grammarly though, okay? Because sometimes it tends to change your writing or change your writing style. Okay? Everyone has an individual style of writing. So if Grammarly suggests something, please do not take it blindly. Read it carefully, and if you don't accept what it is suggesting, please reject it. Okay? But it also gives you some interesting feedback, for example, on grammar structures, on punctuation structures, on other forms of things. I'll just talk about these two. Anyone who has used MindMap or Mindly? Someone, okay, someone, oh good, someone has used it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Remember, before you, all of you are going to write, all of them are going to write a dissertation. So all of you are going to write a dissertation. Any kind of a long piece of writing requires ideas and how those ideas are connected. For example, if you're, how long is your dissertation? 2 chapters, 3 chapters? 5 chapters. Oh, it's a long one. How big is it? 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 words? 25,000 words. Okay. So it's quite a long piece of writing. So one of the things that you must start thinking, I'm sure many of you have already thought of, is the idea of how am I going to organize it. So it's not simply the question of what I'm going to write about, what the content is going to be, but very minimal things like what goes in chapter 1, what goes in chapter 2, what goes in chapter 3, etc. How are they going to be connected? Because you are not writing individual essays. If you are writing a dissertation, each part of the dissertation needs to be connected in a coherent fashion. So the argument that you start in chapter 1 must conclude in chapter 5, because they are not separate pieces. You are not writing separate papers for publication. Yeah? To do that, one of the things that you could use, technology can help you in, is these 2 apps that are, I mean there are many others. Evernote, for example, is another good example. If anyone who uses Evernote knows that you can also create these maps. So whenever I had a professor, and Srishant sir also knows him, he was my teacher, he said the most brilliant ideas in a human head comes at the most unwanted situations. You are traveling in a very crowded bus and then you have this flash. What do you do? Okay? And sometimes these brilliant ideas also disappear brilliantly. They just disappear. You can't just remember it. What was the idea that I had? Okay? So my teacher in those days, of course, used to say that always carry a small notebook over here and jot it down. Okay? In fact, that's what he used to do. So he used to make this long journey from a place in Delhi called Lakshmi Vihar, and he used to come to the university, and it's a long bus ride. So he would carry this notebook on the bus, make his class notes on that notebook, and then transfer it on a piece of paper. In those days, remember, no computer, no typing. So, and then give them as handouts, because those were the ideas that he had during the travel. Okay? Why am I telling you this story? Because many of these ideas disappear. So what you could do is, these are eternal ones, okay, and they will remain even if you are not there. So they store most of these ideas on the cloud, and they can create a map of these ideas. Okay? So for example, you jot down ideas on MindMap or Mindly, and it can create a sort of a coherence between these ideas. So which ideas link to the other, how can you link these ideas to the others, etc. So it suggests to you how it can be done. So might be an interesting way of, even so you get a feedback in terms of your ideas as well. One, of course, is that I very strongly suggest to all students, because we'll talk about ChatGPT later, which is another issue that we are facing as teachers now. But if you are really interested in writing a good dissertation, I know that if you are struggling, then ChatGPT can be a great help, but I'll tell you what the problems are, okay, later when we come to ChatGPT. But I'm sure that you have come across this site called Online Writing Lab. It's called an OWL. There are 2 OWLs that are available. An Online Writing Lab, it's a free site. Okay? One has been produced by Purdue University. Thank you. So you have the Purdue University OWL and an Excelsior University OWL. Okay? Both of them are free, and if you're really interested in academic writing, which I know is a difficult story in its own sense, it's not like other forms of writing that you are used to, they are great helps. They won't help you in your own writing. So if you're expecting to go there and say that, okay, I've written this, please correct it, they're not going to do it. Okay? But there are stage by stage ways in which they show you how to structure an argument, how to structure a persuasive essay, what are the common words that are used for argumentation, what are the ways in which a sentence can be structured in the form of academic writing, etc. So it's a very, very good help in a certain sense. And you can simply visit this site, including things like how to structure a paragraph. How do you link that paragraph with the second paragraph, etc. Important aspects of academic writing that can, and this is all free. I mean, you don't have to pay a dime for all this. Yeah? So I would suggest that you at least visit this site and see what is available. Okay? There are huge amounts, they keep on adding to it almost every day, huge amount of material available over there, including sample essays, okay? Which you can download and then see how the essay has been structured, etc., etc. Sample essays which have been graded well at Purdue University, so they have uploaded it. So for example, essays that have got an A or an A+, etc. So this, what I'm trying to say is that feedback can come through technology, and there are lots of resources available in terms of technology, in terms of giving feedback through technology. Oh, I forgot about this. This sir would know. So this is this one. This is something called Reverso. Reverso basically uses, it's a translation software, okay? But it is much better than Google Translate, because Google Translate can mislead you. So if you're working with two languages, then Reverso is a good place, especially in terms of foreign languages. It still does not have too much of a database, for example, in many of the global South languages, but they have recently added Hindi to it, and the translations are pretty decent. I mean, you have to kind of improve upon them, but they're okay. So Reverso helps you to do that in a certain sense. It has Sanskrit. Okay. If you want help in terms of actual people who would like to help you out, I would suggest these three people, Nick Peachy, Russell Stannard, and Larry Palazzo. All of them available on these sites. You can drop in your query over there in terms of any help that you need, and they are very good in responding to it. I don't know how they manage to do it. They must be getting thousands and thousands of queries, but they do respond to it. I'll share this with you, so I'm sure that you will get the URLs of these people. Yeah? But if you send them a long piece and expect them to give feedback on that, I don't think they're going to do that. But if there are short queries, they will respond to it. Problem solving. Anyone who has used a Socrative? Okay. So I'm not going to tell you what Socrative is. That's your homework. So find out what Socrative does. I'm sure you can find out right now. Google Docs, of course, everyone I'm sure has used. So Google Docs is a good collaborative document. Okay, and this is something that we do at our university. So if students are writing, let's say, a term paper, so we put them into groups. Okay. So each of them shares a Google Doc where they post their writings on the Google Doc. We don't have a look at it as teachers. Students kind of tell each other, give comments on each other's writings, and sorry, I'm so sorry. So they keep on commenting on each other's writings till they realize that they have reached a point that they would like the teacher to join in, so they add us in, and then we help them out with their writing in a certain way. We of course don't help them with the content, because remember, these term papers are going to be marked, so we don't help them with the content, but in terms of organizing, etc., we help them. And then once we don't say it is okay, submit, etc., we just give our comments and leave, and then the teachers, the students complete their assignments and submit it to us. Okay? So it can be a very good collaborative practice. Unfortunately, what happens in many of the universities and many places is that we think of technology simply as something that can be used individually. That's not true, because collaboration can help you to learn quite a lot. Again, sir will agree that the most common practice of learning is through discussion and collaboration. So you can learn only through that. There is no way that you can learn and sit on a computer alone. Okay? So it is through discussion, through collaboration that you can start learning. Okay? And this is a good practice of doing it. Mentimeter is a good fun site, so you could again try it. You can create quizzes over there, for example, and we use it quite commonly at our university. Almost every teacher does it now. It's become so after every lecture. So before the lecture, we prepare a short quiz. Okay, a short quiz. So you can create a quiz, right? So I deliver my lecture and I say, okay, this is the link to the quiz. Please complete the quiz, which is based on my lecture. Okay, and then you know how much of that lecture has gone in, how much of that. This kind of gives a feedback to the teacher as well, that have they really understood, have they not understood, etc. Of course, you can make it as an assignment as well. So where I say, okay, you complete the quiz, it contains 5 marks or 8 marks or whatever. Kahoot is similarly a kind of a quiz program, which can again be used for different kinds of purposes. So what I'm again trying to tell you is certain technological apps, and there are hundreds. I mean, I've just given the examples of the most famous ones in a certain sense, but there are hundreds of them. Okay? So it can help us in teaching problem solving in a certain sense. Okay? Scaffolding and developing cognitive skills, there are hundreds again, but what I have done over here is just shown you a few. Anyone knows this one? Guess? This is something called Edmodo. It's almost like Facebook, but Facebook for learning. So it's not for social interaction. So Edmodo's, what happens is in Edmodo's, they have a mobile app as well. So you can just have it on your mobile, ask your students to join on the mobile, and then you can have discussions. You can post articles on Edmodo where they have a discussion, they comment on it, etc. So this is some sort of a scaffolding, but it also has a discussion forum. So what many teachers use Edmodo, we haven't used it too much because it requires a bit of a bandwidth. So in low resource classrooms, it's a problem. So if you have very slow internet speed, Edmodos can really malfunction. Okay? But one of the things that one of my friends experimented with, again in an urban setting, is he would fix a time on Thursday, let's say at 6:30 p.m. where all your queries, all the students' queries would come in, and then he would respond to each of them. So kind of problem solving, kind of a scaffolding, or issues that they are facing and writing something, etc. So he would put them into groups and give them different timings on different days, and use Edmodo for doing that. Even when he was traveling. So yeah, that's one of the. So one of the things that is, what I'm saying is, see, what technology can do, you can also do it in the classroom. The only thing is, the only advantage probably of technology is it's anytime, anywhere. Okay, so even if you're traveling, you could do things that was not possible earlier. Of course, there are many others like EduBlogs and Moodle. I'm sure that some teachers would have used Moodle. Moodle is a It's called a learning management system, an LMS. A learning management system is everything comes on Moodle. So your class notes, your lectures, students as assignments, students as term papers, everything is submitted on Moodle, and then it's like a Google Classroom. Okay. But Moodle is Google Classroom has some limitations in size. Okay, Moodle is kind of free. Yeah.
So, this Moodle, it says that the server will shut down on September 22, 2022.
So that's the beauty of technology. Yeah. So some of the things that I'm showing over here might have disappeared completely. Okay. No, Moodle is there. No, Edmodo. See, he's talking about Edmodo. Yeah. So,
It was shut down on
yeah.
2022.
So another thing, the space of technology kind of keeps on changing. So that's why I don't like showing too many of the apps, because the apps might disappear 2 years down the line. So you might start using an app and then it will disappear. Moodle is still there. Yeah? And of course you have Google Classrooms and Google Sites and all that. So you can use all of them for scaffolding in different ways to support students. As I said, I'll give you an example of using blogs and how this can be used. Now, first thing that, and this was a part of an experiment that we did in 2012 with our MA students, and at that time blogs were, well, new at that point of time. So we asked them to create a blog of their own. Okay. And later we realized, so you also experiment with the method that you use in using technology. So they created their own blogs, and then we realized they did not actually need to create their own blogs at all. But anyway, they did it. And what they did was we asked them to produce blogs on WordPress or Blogger. And then the teacher would post topics and link all those blogs together. Sometimes articles that they were supposed to read. If it were topics, the students were given 7 days to write an essay with at least 10 references in the essay. So they should have read at least 10 pieces before they could write the essay. They would then put it on the blog, and the comments were kept open. Okay? Because sometimes you can shut down the comments. Okay? So we kept the comments open, and students started commenting on each other, teachers started commenting on the students' assignment, and then the students went back, revised their assignment based on the comments, and then they posted them back again. Okay. Now I talked about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation a couple of days back. When we first did this experiment, students were okay with it, but after a point of time we realized that they were simply doing it because we were forcing them to do it. In fact, 2 of the students came back to us and said, what's the point of doing this? Because we are not going to ask anything about this in the final exam. Okay. So how is this going to help us? So then we realized we needed to provide some sort of an extrinsic motivation. So what we did was we selected topics that were from the syllabus. Okay. And then we said, now you write. We were assigned, students were assigned particular essays on particular topics. They would write, come back. So what was the extrinsic motivation? I said, you already now have on this blog ready-made answers for your exams. Okay. They were more or less happy with it, but they were still unhappy. 1 year down the line, it went on for 3 years. In the second year, we found that the students were saying, we are working so much on this blog, why are you not giving some marks on this? Okay. So what about our marks? We should get some credit for this, right? So then we decided that we're going to allot a certain amount of credits for the work that they have done on blog. So that also provided a certain sort of extrinsic motivation. I'm telling you this story primarily because in the global south, this is how the examination system works. Because everything, the assessment and testing and examination is so high stakes that is taken as more important than the learning process. So in testing literature, there is a word that is used that is called washback. Okay? Washback is the effect that a test has on the person who is taking the test. Okay? So you can have a negative washback, you can have a positive washback. So the test might help you to learn more. That's a positive washback. But if the test doesn't help you to learn more, actually to learn less and find shortcuts for taking the test, then it is a negative washback. Okay? In the global south in general, not everywhere, but global south in general, you have a testing mechanism which generally has a negative washback. Okay? But the test becomes more important than what you are learning. You have to take the test because it is high stakes. It determines your career, it determines everything. Okay? And this probably is something that we have got from the colonial education system, because again, remember that testing over there was very, very high stakes, etc. And the point that I was trying to make is, and therefore extrinsic motivation is required if you are asking students to do something extra beyond the syllabus, beyond the classroom, etc. Yeah? So this is one example of using technology. Let's come to the final point, and I'll tell you a story so they can all relax now. Okay? So I talked about this emotive, affective aspect of teaching. So it's not a very long story. So there is this gentleman called Sugata Mitra. Sugata Mitra used to work in early 2000s in Delhi. Okay. He used to work with an organization. In those days, remember, computers were just entering the Indian market, mostly in big cities, and there were these companies which would teach you computer languages, how to code, etc., etc. Okay? The two most famous companies in those times was one called Aptech in India, and the second one which was called NIIT. Okay? Sugata Mitra used to work at NIIT. They had a big office in Delhi, and his office had a window nearby, and he used to sit near the window and work on his computer. He was a coder, he was a computer software engineer. And every day from his window, he had just after the wall of his office, there was a wall that separated this office from a slum area. Okay? So every day he used to look out of his window and see that all these children would get up very religiously in the morning. Remember, most of these slum areas in Delhi, and if you have been to Delhi, you would know this, also provide the domestic labor or the basic labor force of Delhi. Okay? So many of these children would get up early in the morning. The family would get the child ready to go to school, and the parents or the entire family would leave for different kinds of work in different parts of the city. Okay. So you would watch every day that these children would get up in the morning, wear their school dress, go to the school, and within an hour or so, they would come back. Okay. So this became a kind of a mystery to him. So he decided once to go and inquire. So he crossed the wall and he went on the other side, and he went to these people, talked to them, and said that, I mean, your children go to school at, let's say, 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, but they seem to come back home by 8:30. So what is there? So the parents said, actually, there is no teacher in the school that most of these children go to. So there is just one teacher who sometimes comes, who sometimes doesn't come. which is still the case, let me tell you. I'm not telling a story about 25 years back. This is still a case in many parts of South Asia, I mean, just not in India. And therefore the children go over there because they are served breakfast. Okay? So they will go and eat there, eat their fill, and then they will come back home. So then Sugata Mitra asked them that what do they learn, what do they study? So they said they don't need to actually, because once they grow up, they will enter the labor force. Okay? They will go and work somewhere, etc. That's the idea. Now Mitra was very disturbed with this. So he came back to his office and he said, okay, if there are no teachers, let me at least do something about it. So first he thought that he will go and teach. But of course, like any salaried person, any person who is working, he just didn't have the time. Remember, computer coders have no time. They can start at 8 in the morning, go until 12 in the night, etc. So he decided to do an experiment. Well, not an experiment, he decided to do something. Okay? He didn't even think of it as an experiment. So remember, there is this wall between his office and the slum. So what he does is he creates a hole in the wall. In those days, he picks up a desktop, okay, and puts the screen of the desktop on the side of the slum. Okay? So the children or people in the slum can see the screen. Okay? It's like a ATM kiosk. Okay? The hardware was on this side of the wall towards his office, and he connected it to the internet. Okay? He connected the desktop to the internet and he left it there. Three months, and he kept on seeing from his windows that a large number of children, first 2 or 3, then a large number of children started coming, and there was a crowd, then there was a queue. The children would wait for their turns to come to the computer. So he was again curious at what are they doing. I mean, they don't know anything about any language. Remember, all language on computers was in English. There was no other language available at that point of time. This is early 2000s. Okay. So what are they doing with the computer? So he again goes there, he finds out, he talks to the students, to the children, and the children, so he says, show me what you do. So they said, oh, you have to, the children in Hindi say, using English words, he says, uncle, you have to press enter over here. Aapko enter dabana hai. That is what they say. So he says, how did you learn that this is enter? Okay? Or how did you learn these English words? So the leader of that children's group comes up and says that sometimes you can put it on volume mode and the computer speaks. So we'll hear those words and we'll listen from them. So Mitra then said that, okay, let me give you a problem. I want you to solve it. Okay? Find out about evolution. I'll come after 1 month and you have to explain to me what is the theory of evolution. That is your task. A month later, when he goes and talks to many of the children, he finds out that many of them could explain what evolution meant, learning from the internet. He then converted this into an experiment where he used this. It became famous as hole in the wall experiment because of that hole in the wall, where he repeated this across not only India and South Asia, but then later across disadvantaged sections of the world, including in Spain, in Peru, in Bolivia, and mostly global south. And in some of them, he started giving them even more complex forms. For example, in one of the classrooms, the video is there online, he tells the students to solve, remember these are 8 or 9-year-old kids. He tells them, I want you to solve fractal equations. He comes back after one of the most difficult equations in mathematics. He comes back after 2 months. They can't solve them, but they know what they are. And they know partially how they work. Okay? Based on this almost 7, 8 years, 10 years of experiment, Sugatamatra is still alive. I mean, he is in Newcastle now. He proposed 3 things, radical things. He says that in the global south, the further you go away from the city or urban centers, less the likelihood that you will get a better education. This again is based on the fact that many teachers who teach in urban localities refuse to go and teach in the rural areas because, I mean, they might have problems of family or their family's education. They don't want to go to rural areas. Okay? So, what happens is you have a concentration of the best minds in certain areas and really, really poor conditions of teaching as you, so depending on the distance that you are from the city, the quality of education is inversely proportionate. Okay. First. Secondly, he said that this doesn't mean that the curiosity of children is inversely proportional. Okay. But that is what is assumed. So, there is an implicit assumption that rural children do not have same kind of, in Sanskrit we call medha, intellect, as city based children. And therefore, this also compounds the problem. How do you solve it? And this was the radical solution he said. He said, actually in the world of computers, you do not need teachers anymore. You don't need them. It was absolutely radical. People went up in arms and said that what is he saying? He said, and he gave this acronym. He called it SOUL. It stands for self-organized learning environment. Okay. What computer technology has made possible to do today is that you can self-organize your learning. Okay. You don't need an external person to help you out anymore. Okay. And because there is a community of children, they help each other. Okay. In fact, the experiments that he conducted, he published a book on this later, consistently showed, not only in India, but across, he did it in Sri Lanka, he did it in Bangladesh, he did it in Nepal, Bhutan, the South Asian countries, he did it in Cambodia, Vietnam, Argentina, Peru, Brazil, etc., the Latin American South, the African South, etc., and everywhere he found the same results. So he was convinced that this is the only way out now. So computer technology has allowed you to produce the self-organized learning environments and you don't really need a teacher. Okay. By 2014 onwards, however, when he went back to these communities of learners, they constantly kept on saying, we wish that there was someone whom we could talk to because we can't talk to this computer. Okay. And Sugatamitra changed his opinion a bit. He was adamant. I remember he had major fights with almost all educators. Okay. But 2014-15 onwards, he has started changing. He still believes that teacher is not needed. But now he has started believing that children need emotional or affective support. Okay. And his theory is that in South Asian countries, the most effective affective or emotional support is given by the grandmother. Okay. So he has now created something called, it is still ongoing, a Granny Cloud. It's called now the Granny Cloud project. So what he does is, for example, he still carries on with his experiment. So from the picture that you see over here, it's a rural school in Sri Lanka. And he, of course, has put up the screen and computers and technology and everything. Students mostly learn on their own in this environment. But after every 2 hours or so, a grandmother comes, a grandmother-like figure, not necessarily a grandmother-like figure would come and simply talk to the students. That's it. She might not know anything about the subject that is getting taught. But her simple presence, now Mitra says, makes learning faster. So the very fact that she says there, oh, that is so nice, oh, that is so beautiful, oh, you have done such a wonderful job, etc., helps them. This emotive, affective aspect helps them to learn better. Okay. In other words, to wrap up the story, the emotive and the affective, which was generally thought of as something that is absolutely human, can also be done through technology now. And that is what Mitra wanted to show. So you don't really need a grandmother in the class, but you can beam a grandmother. So as you can see, she is a white woman from the UK. And most of the times they don't even understand each other in terms of language. Okay? But the very presence of it produces that affective, emotive support. Okay? That's what Mitra says. I'll pause if you have any comments or questions, please.
Obviously, there's this affective side, but also we can't just give internet to children like without any guidance. That's another factor. How do we, because here I was going through the Wikipedia page regarding that whole in the wall project. Here someone named Michel Atanu, he says that they see as they see this kind of experiment as dumb hardware in schools for magic to happen.
Okay.
That is true. I mean,
He was severely critiqued, but I thought I'll tell you the story anyway.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
So remember, it's a very radical thought because you have been used to this idea of a teacher in the classroom. And what he's suggesting is that this can now be replaced by technology. And this kind of triggers many of the worst fears of humanity. Because remember, humans against technology has been a very old fear. So whenever some new technology appears, there is always this fear that machines will take over us. You look at all the film representations of technology. Any future representation of technology is always dystopic in nature. It's always technology will overwhelm us, it will kill us.
One example, if I could give to my neighbor, there's one chap, there's one boy, we call him Babu, nobody knows his name, we just call him Babu. So one day he came to my house and I was surfing Google Earth and I showed him that, okay, these are the things, and I showed him some places in Japan, some places in somewhere, beautiful places. Then and then I went to college. And after I came, Diwali holiday, he had a great knowledge of geography. See, he used to come back from school and he just kept browsing through Google. And now he knows like many places, how it looks, their culture, their custom, how people look. So that could happen, but
No, one of the greatest, so let me tell you what the critiques of Mitra is. Some of the educators, for example, point out that what Mitra is assuming is that information is knowledge. And that's a major problem in education. I mean, you might get huge amounts of information, but that doesn't mean it becomes knowledge. Okay? So for that knowledge, that transformation of information into knowledge is something that requires much more criticalities, etc. So, but I thought I'll tell you this story anyway, in order to understand that there are other forms of radical thinking of technology. Of course, we are aware what the problems that can be. For example, So Mitra was very careful with this because he knew that he was using children in this thing. So he would put in safety protocols, security protocols. They could not access certain sites. So all those were there, of course. But the assumption seems to be a bit too radical, that you cannot confuse information with learning. So you might have a lot of information, that doesn't mean that you have learned, etc. But anyway, an interesting person to follow. So he's there, he's quite active on Facebook and he's quite active on Instagram as well. Must be around late 70s now. Yeah. So let's come to your problem. So you know the idiomatic expression elephant in the room. So how many of you use ChatGPT or Gemini? Everyone. What do you use it for? Sir is laughing. They will not tell the truth. Saurabh, okay. So what do you use it for?
So there are many ideas in our head and to put it in a structured manner. Everything is very clumsy. Like it comes with I want to put this, but I cannot just present it. To make it more presentable.
Okay, great. Okay. How many of you use it for preparing PowerPoint presentations? Don't do it. You can. It's very good actually. It's quite good in doing that. It's not very good.
It's very superficial and all the idea that you want to put a transform in some very structure. It's not. I think it's good just an assistant of searching some information, some sources. Otherwise, I think the key thing is how you ask.
Yeah. That's a very important point. We'll come to that. What else do you use it for, other than writing your assignments or whatever?
I use it to learn languages.
To learn languages, okay.
For example, I give ChatGPT one sentence in Greek,
Prompt,
and
yeah.
I asked it to translate into Latin, Sanskrit, Odia, and so on.
It's more or less successful in doing that because it uses, so if you know the theory behind ChatGPT, it uses something called LLMs, large language models. It's your language, my language. So what they do is remember, to run programs like this, it's an environmental disaster because it needs huge data banks, and because they need huge data banks, they have to be cooled, and for cooling that data server, it takes thousands, millions megawatts of energy to cool those systems. So it's environmentally disastrous, but since it's there, we can't really ignore it, especially if we are teachers in the classroom today. And we know that, and all of us know as teachers, that our students are going to use it, and it's not, sometimes sticks do work, but carrots work better. Okay. The issue with ChatGPT or Gemini or any kind of an AI tool that you use, there are many, ChatGPT and Gemini are the most famous ones. I mean, there are a couple of issues. For example, even if you run it through anti-plagiarism software, okay, like Turnitin, it fails to detect it. Primarily because ChatGPT takes sources from different places, and it's almost impossible, sometimes existing sources, etc. So the question over here is not really the question of whether we should use AI. The question over here is the question of whether we should use AI ethically. Okay? So it's a question of ethics. It's not a question anymore of whether we should use it or not. It is there. People will use it. It is easy to use. Okay? It gives you instant information, probably much better information than when you search on a Google search. Yeah? It gives you huge amounts of references, other reading materials. So it's almost one place where you can find all these things. So what I can do is simply advise. It's all up to you whether you take that advice or not. Okay? because I know that saying don't use it, it's not going to work because it is there. You really can't stop people using it. So how do you use it is probably the only way of getting out of it, especially when it comes to language learning, language education, etc. Because one of the dangers of ChatGPT is this: all you need is to produce a prompt and it gives you everything. So this, remember the struggle disappears. You don't have to struggle at all. If it is all ready made there, and they look very impressive. And because they look very impressive, it kind of immediately puts you on the back foot. It immediately says, oh, you cannot write like I do. And therefore you feel, oh, I must take this rather than use my own language, etc. So that's the problem of AI. So instead of producing content, what you said and what you said, I think a better way to use AI is by suggesting structure. For example, if you give a prompt like, can we have some MA dissertation topics? What are you working on your dissertation? Oh, not second semester, fourth semester. Fourth semester dissertation topics. You said memory in the Cuban novelist? No.
I'm working on memory inside all these planets.
Okay. All right. Shantara Mahabharat, I know yours. Yeah, I know Garima's also remember. Others, what are they working on?
I'm analyzing living characters in a specific chapter of Homer.
Okay. Others? Oh, rest are all first year.
No, they are not approved.
And comparison to heroin Academy and Korea Indonesia.
Okay.
Already.
Yeah. Buddhist songs, okay. Bhutanese songs, okay. All right. Oh no, your first semester, second semester. So what you could do is, if you're writing a dissertation, you could tell simply ChatGPT to write it for you, it will give it to you. There's no problem. Okay? It will probably write everything on Shantarasa that is ever available in the history of Shantarasa or in the history of memory. All you can do is you take it off and you add your own ideas, you do this, etc., which is not a very good idea at all, but that's something that many people tend to do. So what ChatGPT can help you with is, forget this one, the content. The content should come from you. But it can help you in the structure. So instead of the prompt as something like, give me an essay on Shantarasa or give me an essay on memory, you tell ChatGPT the prompt should be something like this. I'm writing this over this. I would like a structure of this. So what it does is it gives you a structure through which you can accept it, you can reject it. If you don't think that structure is too good, you can always revise it, etc. But the structure then helps you to produce the writing. I still am a bit worried because the learning of structure is also the learning of writing. Okay? If someone else is doing it for you, it's very important for your writing. Okay? But if you feel, I know that when you're writing a dissertation, you are under pressure of time, you have to do a lot of other things along with writing the dissertation, etc. It might be a good idea to have a look at different sorts of structures that are possible and then choose the best one. So ChatGPT can do that. The second thing, never ask it to write content of a research paper. Ask it to produce an outline for something. Yeah? So generating research questions, again extremely problematic, but you can it produces huge amounts of research questions. There will be 25 research questions it produces. Okay? So you can look at them, you can have a look at them. That gives you guidance of some sort. So it provides some sort of a scaffolding Again, taking it is your choice or not your choice, etc. Oh, this is too small. It actually is quite good for interview preparation. It is very good for interview preparations. So if you are planning to go for an interview after your MA, you can simply ask it that I am planning to go for this interview for a teacher or for an NGO or for this thing. What are the kind of questions that they are likely to ask me? And it searches the database and it provides, let's say, 200 questions. Now you can choose which questions are relevant to you. So it's quite good at that. It's quite good in structuring a PowerPoint, okay? Because remember, the slides should have some sort of this thing. Again, there are problems. This is a new technology, remember, so it's still learning, okay? But it's learning very fast, and maybe 6 months down the line, it's going to completely change the way it functions now. And therefore, one thing that I keep on telling everyone, whenever, including my own students, is that the AI, the artificial intelligence, needs to be combined with your own forms of understanding things. Your personal intelligence plays an important role, okay? And you can't avoid it. It's there. It's readily available, etc. Many of you will use it, I know, but just keep these warnings in mind a bit here. Please do not use it for creating reference lists. That's the worst thing that it does. A lot of people actually type in, create a reference list for this topic. It creates reference lists of things that doesn't exist. So be,
Historical references.
yeah,
Is much totally different things that are not, are very wrong.
it's still terrible at creating reference lists. It's actually thinking, it has an ego, I think. So if you have asked it to do something, it needs to produce something, and it produces something which can be extremely terrible. So some of the reference lists, if you actually click on them, they don't exist at all. So be very careful. So please do not create reference lists with these. Okay? If you really want to use something for research lists, they don't give you reference lists, but research lists on a topic, kind of books, articles available. Then you could use something like R Discovery, which is a bit better, which is a research site. It's a Columbia University site, so it helps. It is based on actual research that has happened. Okay, if you want to find reference books or research books, etc. Okay, so as I said, I promised that we'll have questions. Okay. We're doing okay with time, so that's 15 minutes. So questions for us. So when we are using technology, and these are questions for all of us to discuss. Okay. So one of the important things about technology is how much of access do we have. Okay. So is it socially and contextually inclusive? Your responses. So for example, people who have taught, people who have not taught, what has been your experience of technology in terms of social, contextual inclusion? How much of technology, sorry.
Technologies are, before maybe if you want to buy a computer, it was very expensive. At the time, it's
Yeah.
less expensive, and also many people even didn't use computers as jump to mobile phone.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's a very, to compare
yeah,
with
yeah,
cheap
yeah,
technology, and you can access to everything.
yeah, yeah,
Also, of course, it is that this device has a certain way of using different from this
yeah,
device. So
yeah.
also maybe, I don't know if it could be or not, but your process of thinking could be different if
Yeah.
you use a specific device or another
Another-
one. So,
yeah.
um,
True. Yeah.
But
So there is
The
something,
access is kind of more inclusive.
yeah,
Because technology is cheaper than before.
yeah, yeah.
in some-
And therefore, what has happened over a period of time, historically speaking, remember, people could not even afford, forget computers. Even mobile phones, when they were first launched in the market, were quite expensive in nature. Now, of course, there is much more mobile density across the population. So, the question when we need to answer the question whether technology is going to be used for language learning, also needs to answer this question. For example, how much technology do you have in the Indonesian school that you are in?
In the school, we have many technology rooms also. But in my city, like we have a rural area, they still have a technology. Like,
Okay.
yeah. So in this school also we don't have a laptop, like lab, computer lab.
Okay, right. People who are teaching in schools, how much of technology did the schools use? Not much. No.
I have a question. So, I taught in a private school, then I was teaching in a government school also by my internship. So, the difference that I saw was that when I entered the private school, so this question that we have is the technology socially, contextually inclusive and also for students and teachers. One thing that I found problematic there was, like when I entered the class, because it was a private school, which was an English medium school, and now that we have technology everywhere, so Instagram is everywhere. Any nook and corner of the country, any village, any remote village. So the first question that the students asked me was, "Ma'am, what's your Instagram handle?" So
Yeah.
that
That is an important, we'll come to that, for example. So these questions of privacy is very different questions now, primarily because it's very common now for handles that were supposed to be private or accounts that were supposed to be private to be a part of the sharing mechanism of a school. Okay, many schools, for example, in the global south, insist that you have to create a WhatsApp group of your students. We belong to the transition generation. I was very resistant to this because I didn't want to share my private number with my students, my private mobile number. Why should I share it? But then it became a kind of, well, rule, and you had to do it, okay, because it was meant for instant communication, etc. Now, of course, we have groups for everything, for parents, for grandparents. I don't know, every member of the family can join that group, etc.
I it kind of radically changed the relationship dynamics.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
like when I was in school, we were so scared of teachers that
Yeah.
we couldn't even think of calling them at any time.
Yeah,
But while now I have a WhatsApp group, students are just texting me at any time. So this kind of breaches the privacy, and then it is a matter
Yeah.
of concern for teachers.
okay,
How do they regulate this and maintain that
yeah,
student-teacher relationship
yeah.
within the classroom?
We don't know. I mean, I don't have answers. So good questions to ask, but I don't really know what the answers are. Our friend over here, he taught at primary and university level, so that would be an interesting experience. How much technology was getting used there?
Technology.
Yeah.
Actually, my well, I'm teaching primary is very rural area,
Okay.
so we don't use at all. And it's also 2012, I think, and it's until before I came here, I teach in university English to SMI for other departments.
Yeah.
I'm working with them. So, but as my university's distance education, they only learn about 10 days for the whole year.
Okay.
So we don't have much time to use this
Experiment with
Yeah.
technology.
in,
Okay.
in the classroom. But
Your experience of teaching at the university?
Yes, in my university, and I think in all university in Jakarta, we have e-learning, and this e-learning like connect to student, officer, and Minister of Education also, and teacher, and we can use this to assignment, to get student thesis, to teach, to present to all many things, and also connect with like a Kahoot, like
So you have quite
publication.
massive use of technology,
Yes,
quite
yes.
extensive use of
Yeah.
technology. Okay. What was your experience? I'll come to you. Sorry. What was your experience of?
Sir, in NGO technologies of knowings, I had to make them sit and tell them stories, and first of all convince them that this is useful for them, because they felt education is not important. Like for the students like them, and technology meant nothing. The basic necessity was more important to them
Yeah, yeah,
rather than technology.
yeah.
So their technology was nothing.
Okay.
I have a different experience because I was also teaching in an NGO, but it was a online teaching program. So we were given some like 2 or 3 students, and I also had a co-teacher. So the only medium that we had was this mobile phone and voice call and WhatsApp calling. So that is how we were teaching. We were given a curriculum, how we were supposed to teach the language starting from the alphabet to the simple sentences. And in my experience, I mean, technology was the main route to the things.
So it helped you quite a lot
Yes.
in that sense. Okay.
So I have experience of teaching in 2 schools.
Okay.
Both of them private and university. So the one school, they had, I don't know if I should use the word, richer kids. So they have all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
internet and the digital screen and all. So there I had to
Use technology more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
technology. I had to make a PPT one night before. I had to do all the
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Then I used to go and teach them. But in other school, they were not rich kids. So there it's only textbooks.
Ah.
Test.
So I think one of the things that we'll have to think of when we are talking about this great gadgets and great apps and everything is also the nature of social context in which we are teaching. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we are talking about technology in a big sense. The second round of questions is of course the platform, the software. And we can ask 3 questions on this. So I talked about Moodle and other things. Now Google Classroom, for example, is not going to work in China. They don't have Google. They don't have Facebook. So when you are in a different kind of a situation where, or depending on the bandwidth that you have, a Google Classroom might work with a standard bandwidth, but might not work with a low bandwidth at all. Okay. So questions like how flexible and adaptable are the softwares? Do the apps work across devices? For example, the example that you were, I think you were giving, and someone, so mobile, Garima was talking about mobile phones. Many schools might not have computers at all or laptops at all, so where mobiles work better. Now if you carry a software or a platform where it is not mobile friendly at all, it's not going to work. So again, these kind of decisions play an important role. And of course the larger questions of network bandwidth, how much of bandwidth is available, etc. Of course not decisions that we are going to make, but decisions that have to be taken into consideration. Any decision that you reach needs to take into consideration these kind of questions when you're using technology. So something that needs to be kept in mind. Safety, an issue that came up. For example, you said you were dealing with children, so safety of children was an important aspect. So of course these are important questions today. Are identities safe? Global South has a bit more liberal attitude towards these forms of identities. Global North has not. Okay, so children's identities are extremely important. You cannot really reveal children's identities, etc. And remember, to keep identity safe, it requires more money. To create a platform which will ensure privacy, etc., there is a whole lot of other technologies that need to come in. Okay? So do you have the money to do that, etc.? A recent issue, of course, is the issue of copyright and IPR. And again, it's very relaxed in the global south. I don't think I'm going to say this on record, but there are websites which we know students use and which we know are copyright violations. Shall we put it at that? Okay. And sometimes it so happens that teachers are not aware that these are copyright violations. I'm not going to name the websites, all of you know these websites. Yeah? So if you want to share a book which has been published in 2024, you go to this site, you download the book and you share it with the students. Now how ethical is that? So questions of this kind also comes up with technology. Okay? Some radical teachers think that we should do it. Why should we pay the publishers and make them more rich, etc. But remember, some of the money also goes to the poor authors who write these books. Okay? So in doing that, you're also ethically violating that role. The fourth thing, which is a more of a technical question, is that most of the software that we think about, for example, Google, etc., now are all so you need to pay a certain fee. For example, I'm sure that you get emails from Google saying that your drive is full now, please pay this much money to expand your space, etc. So they are all monetized in a certain form. But there are also open source softwares, okay, like Linux, okay, or Ubuntu. Now Linux and Ubuntu are based on the philosophy that internet is free for everyone. But then you need to be trained in that. So if you are using open source softwares, then you have to train people to do that. So that requires extra efforts, extra money, etc. Okay, so again something. So some of my friends who are open source activists, they sometimes say that some of the American companies, I'm not going to name them on record, are evil because they actually took open source codes, then patented them and started selling them at a premium price. I'm sure that you know which company I'm talking about, but this is what they did. Okay? So these were supposed to be free codes. Anyway, so these kind of questions. Feedback mechanisms, as I said, are there feedback mechanisms? Is it collected from students and teachers? How are they going to be used? Okay? Many schools and colleges have now this feedback systems integrated in the LMS, the learning management system. So once you teach a class, you get feedback from the students, and teachers also give feedback on the students. Okay. Now the questions again are of privacy, questions again are of confidentiality, how much of it is going to be used against you, etc. So all these questions need to be thought about before you actually think of implementing technology in a big way in a classroom. Okay. As I promised, there are two research traditions. Remember, this is something very new, okay? But there are two research traditions of how to look at technology, and this is primarily for first year students, because the fourth year students, the first semester students have already decided what they're going to do. For the first semester students, if you want to take up some research projects on using technology for anything, or use of technology as a cultural product. So it's not simply, I'm not saying that you take up a project only on language learning, but you can think of technology as something that is a part of your social cultural existence. And then you could look at, for example, literary texts and technology, etc. So there are two major research traditions in this. One is called the Magister tradition, which is primarily quantitative. Okay? These are terms that are used by a famous technology theorist called Warshauer. If you are interested, you could read him. So Mark Warshauer, so Warshauer says that one of the things that we need to think about in technology is that sometimes technology is used as, I use this technology in the class, and so there is treatment, there is a treatment X, and I want this technology to produce this result. So you have a result Y. Okay. So these kind of traditions are called quantitative traditions. I'm sure that in research methods you have learnt about this. So it is based on this hypothesis that if I do this, it will produce this result, and that result can be measured in a certain way. So that's called a magister tradition. Yeah. The second one is called a pedagogue tradition, which is more qualitative in nature, which is something where it helps you to understand the micro world. Okay. So rather than thinking of this technology will change what is happening in the class, you are trying to think in terms of how does the student learn through technology. So you are looking at very micro elements. So you go and interview students, you go and talk to students, you do informal interviews with students, etc. So that's the second tradition of doing technology. Now, depending on what you choose, you can have an instrumental use of technology where you use technology as an instrument. I'm going to use it as an instrument to improve my students' speaking, or I'm going to use it as an instrument to improve my students' writing. Okay? So that is the magister tradition. Or you can think of technology as a social use of technology. So how do people use technology socially? So I'll tell you the story, and this is where we end. So I gave you one example of instrumental use of technology when I gave you the example of blogs. I remember. So what we intended to do is, blogs was just a tool. We could have used anything else, but we were using this technological tool to help students in their writing. So the idea was, we had a goal: use this technology to achieve improvement in writing skills. Okay. So we have come across this. So what are the common features of instrumental practice? It's mostly teacher initiated. So I control everything. I see technology as an achievement medium. My students are using it so I achieve something through this technology. And my goals are predetermined. I want my students to learn autonomy or writing skills or discussion skills or whatever, for the purpose that I am using this technology for. So this is the instrumental use of technology. I'm sorry for people who, it's written in the Romanized script, but people who don't understand English or understand Hindi, this is something that you need to translate. So people need to translate for people who don't understand Hindi. Okay? The script is Romanized. I'm not using the Hindi script. Even Hindi speakers would find it difficult to understand. What is Avi? You know Avi? Oh, that's great. So can someone please speak it out loudly what Avi means?
Just like that.
Just like that. Okay. This is actually a translation. This is a misprint. It is the be kuch bas nahi hai Avi. Bus, it's bus nahi hai Avi. Okay. It doesn't matter what it means. I just wanted to show you this. I'm sure that this most of you understand, except this word. Kal is yesterday. Can someone please translate for people who don't understand? No, no.
That's fine. That's fine. I didn't see that.
I didn't see that mail. Next one.
I'll do it after the exam.
I'll do it after the exam. This is okay. This is okay. All right. Of course, nowadays you can use emojis. These were a bit dated. These are social chats. So they're, as you can see, they're all anonymous for privacy protection. So we did a project with our students where we asked for what is known as data donation. Okay. So we said that you can retract your data. We don't want you to share extremely personalized data or whatever, but if you are willing to donate your data, what you do in your messaging. Okay. We don't want any names, etc. So what they did was they sent us huge amounts of these messages. I've just taken a 4 example of that, but we have at least around 800 of them. And we looked at that. Okay. But then we realized when we were doing the blogs project, the blog experiment, our focus was, remember, the instrumental. But a lot of these kind of things were happening even on the blog, which we completely ignored. Okay. I'll show you one example of that. So for example, when the teacher gave feedback to one of the students' writing, one other student also gave feedback to the same student, critiquing her. Okay. And remember, this is a public platform, so everyone is seeing what the others are doing. So I give feedback to, let's say, student A, and he gives feedback to student A, critiquing him. And then suddenly you have this very uneasy silence that is going on. Because remember, this is a public platform and they are seen as public shaming. Yeah? So I'll just show you what happened after that. Just skip this. I'll read it out. So this student, remember, has been criticized by a friend. So she writes, I've posted my critical comments and some friends of our group, she doesn't name her, some friends of our group have sent their opinions about my critical comments. But I won't give them my cross comments because those who have sent me their cross comments, they should read my name, comments given to me. So she is saying that sir has already given me my comments, I don't care what you say. Okay. I would like to say thanks to them who have given their cross comments to me. Very polite, but obviously very offended. Okay. On reading this, the person who was critically commenting on this person writes back, my dearest friend, and I have redacted the name, it's good you have shown all of us to look at my name, sir's comments, which he gave for you. However, it seems like you shying away from replying me, and dear, it was only a view. I didn't write it for the sake of just contradicting. Well, those are my own views and I stand by it. We are here to discuss things and not the other way around. This is just the first part. And this goes on and on and on. Till 2 teachers were involved with this, we had to intervene and say, okay, I think this conversation is over, we'll have to stop over here. But remember, when we were analyzing all these things, because our focus was simply on the blog and how the blog was improving writing, we didn't take this into account at all. And this was what was happening socially. And I'm sure that all of you have experienced this in your social media lives, that these kind of things happen more commonly, which also helps you in negotiation, which is an important part of language or any kind of a learning. Okay? So we completely ignored these kind of things, and therefore we know that what is known as flaming, all of you are aware of flaming, right? There is this sudden eruption in social media. So someone says something and then there is this huge amount of, so that's called flaming, that phenomenon is called flaming. So there is sudden flaming that happens in social media. It's a common part of social media. We also know that there is a lot of negotiation, dialoguing that happens. Okay, there is a lot of negotiation because you are not face to face. There is a lot of things that you keep on writing to each other, etc. There's also a lot of navigation of identities because you don't really know at all times that what social media identities are all about. In fact, Sherry Turkle, one of the major psychologists of digital world, says that everyone who is born in 2000s and after have Windows personality. She calls it Windows personality. So remember, if you are working on a laptop, you have different windows open, right? You are working on an assignment, you are also checking your email, you are also checking your Facebook, you are also checking on Instagram, you are also probably applying for a job in another window, etc. And Turkle argues that every one of that has a different identity. When you are working as an assignment, you are a student. When you are on Instagram, you are a different person. You project yourself differently, use different sorts of filters to project yourself, etc. Yeah? So you are different everywhere. So you have this multiple windows personality all the time working at the same time. And therefore, you have a lot of navigation of identities that happen. There's also an awareness of community. So you know which community to belong to, which community not to belong to. Digital communities are important communities, etc. I'm sure that you have been in groups, WhatsApp groups, where someone has said something and you have exited the group. Have you ever done that? How many of you have done that? That you are in a WhatsApp group and someone has said something and you have taken offense and then you leave. And then people will kind of message you personally, "Arey, why did you leave? Please come back and join. This doesn't look nice," etc. So there's also all these things happening all the time. And so there is an awareness of community at the same time. So again, the question therefore is, how do we capture this in our learning? Okay? Because the social is the most difficult to negotiate. And so when we are talking about language learning, do we simply stick to instrumental ways of using technology? I will use technology to make students learn writing. Or do we also look at the social use of technology? How people use it socially? What do they do? What sort of learning experiences happen over there? So that's another question that we need to think about. Sorry. So what are the common features of social practice? This is the end. So we have situated practices. People use technology. Remember, technology when it first came in, it was not meant for teaching. Technology came in as a social form. Okay? So it was not meant for the purposes of teaching at all. It was meant for the purposes of social interaction. That is how technology came in. So we need to understand that situated nature of technology itself before we can start thinking about using it for learning, etc. So it was not pedagogy driven. So pedagogy was not the primary thing of technology. You can use Facebook for teaching language, but that was not the purpose of Facebook, right? You can use Instagram for teaching different sorts of things, but it's not the purpose of Instagram, etc. And remember, again, you do not have control over the language resources on technology. You just can't control language on the internet. It's impossible, right? So what sort of a language do you bring to the classroom? How do you change it? Do you want to change it? Do you want to keep it as authentic as possible? We don't know. Okay. And therefore, there are these rules of engagement that are of a dialogic community. So in any kind of a platform, I mean, you choose, right? Who are your friends on Facebook? Whom do you follow or don't follow on Instagram, etc.? Which handles to follow, etc. So all these are choices that people make. And these choices are dependent on certain kinds of choices that you have kind of in your head decided that these are the communities that you belong to. These are the dialogues that I want to continue. Okay? And these are the dialogues that I don't want to continue. All these questions come in when we talk about using technology for language education. Because these are important issues. This is how you use technology. We can't say you are someone else outside the classroom and you are someone else inside the classroom, because these kind of overlap. Okay? And these kind of things need to be kept in mind when we use technology in the classroom. So the final questions. Do we need to integrate technology? Yes, no? Yes. So if we need to integrate technology, then how? I mean, that is the important question. Yeah? So how do we make it relevant to our curriculum? That is the most important question that we need to think about. Yeah? Because what you are, for example, in world literatures, I am sure that all of you are doing different sorts of texts, different sorts of readings, and I'm sure that you're using a lot of technology as well in terms of getting material, getting help from other people, getting communities to respond to whatever questions that you have, taking help of research forums, etc. So you are using technology in a certain way. But remember, what you are doing there is not going to be a part of the assessment of what you are doing here. So how do you integrate that? How do you bring that in? The new national education policy, at least in India, says that the things that you are assigned to do outside the classroom can also be given credits. But then it's not as simple. I mean, how do I decide that someone has visited 20 sites, someone has visited 5 sites? Those 5 sites are much richer than the 20 sites someone has visited. How do I mark that? So all these questions come into existence the moment we think of integrating into the curriculum. Remember, how do we, so she just pointed out to me that Sir Edmodo doesn't exist anymore. It stopped functioning in 2022. So there is constant digital slippage. So for example, I say, please go to this site and check this site out. It might not exist tomorrow. So there's constant slippages of digital spaces all the time. Digital traffic, major problem. Okay, so how do we look at digital traffic? So in fact, there are these jam periods, certain periods of time that there is huge amount of digital traffic, certain periods of time there are, so, finished? Yeah, thank you. So there are other periods of time, there are hardly any digital traffic, okay. So all these questions also come into existence. And the questions of digital divide. So where to use technology, what kind of technology, low resource technology, high resource technology, etc. I'll give you some examples tomorrow when we talk about materials production, especially in reference to low resource classrooms. Okay. Low resource classrooms, classrooms that might not have, for example, heavy high speed internet, classrooms that might not have even computers. I'll give you some examples where some experiments have been conducted, how to bring different sorts of teaching methods within that and also integrate technology in a certain way. Okay. And of course, with today's, there is a new method that is coming up, which I didn't discuss in my methods class 2 days back, is a method called adaptive learning. Okay. So it's called an adaptive learning method, which basically means just like technology adapts to different ways it develops, it evolves into different ways, our teaching method should also evolve in similar ways. I'm not a big fan of it, but I thought I'll just mention it. Because if you keep on changing your teaching methods like technology does, then you really need to be fast. Okay? And what is more important, rather than simply thinking of yourself as something which mimics a machine, or do you think that certain things should be continued over a long period of time and not change just because technology has changed to do it? Okay, so those kind of things again become important. Okay, I'll stop. Any queries, comments? Thank you.
I don't think the people who use technology, most of the people who use technology, they are introspective about technology. In that sense, what happens, the technology in a sense becomes the content of the technology. So there is an erasure of the medium, and we are concerned about the product that medium needs to
Shorts and reels and
Yeah,
yeah.
shorts and reels. So we are not we don't think at that point of time that we are using a cell phone. It becomes so natural for us that the medium through which we are interacting with those stuff, it gets deleted. If not deleted, then it just gets out
Yeah.
of our functioning mind.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a very important
Yeah.
part, because when you show that those comment, how to say, blaming, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure after a certain point of time, those students were not, kind of aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's also a very important part of.
No, so that's a important philosophical question. So Marshall McLuhan, one theorist of technology, said that what happens with digital technology or current technologies is that in earlier forms of technology, there was a clear distinction between what is the medium and what is the message. With digital technologies, the medium is the message. They have collapsed. So when you are going through, a good example is shorts and reels. So the medium becomes the message. You're going through shorts and reels because the medium is the message. Okay? There is no distinction now. And that has its own problems of reflection. What will you reflect on? You could reflect only when these are separated. You could reflect separately on message, you can reflect separately on the medium. Now everything is mediated. Every
I think there is analysis about usability.
yeah, yeah.
So not just from education, but many brands.
Yeah, yeah.
Because how much time you are spending in a specific site. So they are, analyzing how you, as a user, move
Yeah.
better than before. So I think it's very complex.
It's very, see what happens is if you scroll through reels, Instagram reels for example, after a point of time you'll start noticing that similar kind of reels start coming up on your timeline. Yeah. So there is a huge amount of, so algorithms determine what you watch now. So the question of free will and choice, all these philosophical questions don't exist anymore. So they are, so if you have paused, let's say, on a particular ad for 2 seconds more than you were supposed to, those similar ads will keep on coming up because the algorithm has read that you seem to be interested. Okay, so it's an algorithmic world now.
Finally, they say also that in internet you are in a bubble.
Yeah.
You think that you are seeing everything, but this is a kind of bubble in relation with how
Yeah,
they
yeah.
trace your behavior.
Yeah.
I also think there is some kind of lethargy that is induced because of technology as well. So, for example, I can get my hands over some really good kind of information, but because I'm getting it very easily on the internet, which might or might not be true or kind of, but due to efficiency, I would opt for that instead of that particular thing. I think
No, so the question that I'm trying to kind of push through is how does it affect learning? So when we think about terms of, forget language learning, but learning in general. Now some people have extremely dystopic views of technology. Now, but you can't do without it, right? So you really can't be Martin Heidegger, the great Greek philosopher, the great German philosopher. So Heidegger left everything. He went to Black Forest, built a stone hut for himself, refused to have any connections of electricity, refused to carry any telephone or any fridge or anything, and lived his life over there in the forest. You can't do that.
But
Heidegger could do it, but you can't.
but they use and not use technology affect you. You can say you are typing
Yeah, yeah,
and then you go just to a paper
yeah,
and you process and how
Yeah.
what you write is
Yeah.
very different.
yeah, yeah.
So in that sense you have to, of course technology is important, but at what sense,
Yeah.
in what moment is,
Yeah.
because technology is just,
So, for example, there is this YouTube channel, Study ID, right? So, it has lots of, so it
That's a good example, because you know there are channels on YouTube which are called study tubers, and you should see some of them. Maybe one of the projects could be on study tubers actually. So study tubers are these 24-hour channels on YouTube which are constantly live, which starts from, let's say, 9-year-olds, and they have become internet phenomenon now. They have become super, well, they are really celebrities now, internet celebrities now. So they start at 9-year-old and they show you how they are studying, and they have a whole aesthetics to it. So for example, if you are a girl, then you have this pink table and pink ribbons hanging and all that extremely, shall we say, stereotypical view of how you develop as a man or a woman. And then till 18, for example, this girl has cracked Stanford. She will show you the entire process, how I cracked Stanford, and they're extremely popular. And after 2-3 years, they will start get advertisements, because companies will notice that she has 1 million followers or 1 million subscribers. They will say, why don't you also advertise my product? So in between their study time, they will suddenly say, I found this pen holder extremely interesting, so why don't you use this on your table, etc. So they're also selling products of a sudden. So this coming together of learning a certain kind of technological space and monetization of that space are important to understand if you are trying to understand technology.
I was talking to one of my friends. He is on those channels constantly, like study articles. So he constantly is kind of how to say, not looking but listening to podcasts, listening to those things. But what I found was how he used to reflect 3 months back when he used to study, like read. It's very different now. So the power of reflection, the power of thinking, a kind of meta thinking, which lets you critique the thing you read and also the understanding of that. So that is, it's diminishing. Maybe it's not the case with others, but that's what.
So you must read a novel by William Gibson called Neuromancer. It's called Neuromancer, where the human body is given up and your consciousness can travel across cyberspace. Gibson is the one who gave the word cyberspace. So you can leave your body behind, like if you have watched this Christopher Nolan movie Inception, and then you can move through cyberspace and do different sorts of things. So maybe we are reaching that stage, but let's see.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Neuromancer. 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 William Gibson, yeah. All right then, thank you so much for your patience, and we'll meet again tomorrow for different things. Thank you.